Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I'm finally doing my list of the best books that I read last year, the best romance books of 2021. It was actually really hard for me to narrow this down to just 21 books, and I kind of cheated. I included some series here, and I'm also including some additional historical romances. I pretty much separated the 21 books from my favorite old school historical romances that I read last year because there were quite a few of them, and I didn't want to make like 25% of this list be just old school historical romances. So honestly, this list is really like my top 27 books, but you know, whatever, the more recommendations, the better, right? So here are my favorite romances that I read in 2021. I'm not gonna do them in any particular order except for my top three, and my top three aren't even gonna be in any specific order because I really just can't choose. This first one is one that has been on so many lists that I've seen, and it totally deserves all this hype. It is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is her debut from last year, and it has blown up since it released. It was so freaking good. It lived up to all my expectations, and honestly, it went beyond them. It's a STEM romance. The main characters, they work in academia, and it's a fake dating romance. We've got a grumpy hero who hates everyone but the heroine, who actually has a crush on the heroine that she doesn't even know about. She is totally oblivious. So the book is about Olive and Adam fake dating because Olive wants to prove to her best friend that she has moved on from her previous relationship, and Adam needs a fake girlfriend to look better for this grant that he really wants. I just adored Olive and Adam so much here. They were the cutest couple ever. I love the writing, it's so fresh and fun, and I know so many people have talked about this book to death, but honestly, I just loved it. But it was just so good. My heart was extremely happy reading this one, and I just couldn't get enough of it, so it's easily in my top three from last year. Also in my top three is an author who has yet to let me down. It is Real by Kennedy Ryan. I adore everything Kennedy Ryan writes. Her writing is amazing. All of her romances are just so passionate and emotional, and her stories just take you on a journey. Real is one of her Hollywood romances. It's a romance between a director and his new actress. Cannon and Neva are working on this biopic together, and it's slightly forbidden between them, but they can't help but fall in love. I love the way Kennedy Ryan wrote this one. You can just feel the intensity and the love between the main characters here. I mentioned before that I think that Kennedy Ryan kind of writes fated mates, but for contemporary romance. Like, that's how meant to be I feel her romances are. I feel how her main characters are. And then my last of the top three is another super hyped book. For some reason, all the very popular books from 2021 worked really well for me. That usually doesn't happen, but another top favorite from last year was The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This is another fake dating romance. We had some excellent fake dating romances last year. It's also enemies to lovers and an office romance. Aaron and Lena are co-workers, and they do not like each other. And even though they hate each other, Aaron does offer himself up to be Lena's fake date, fake boyfriend when she goes back home to Spain for her sister's wedding. It is quite slow burn, but I just love the tension here. I love their chemistry. The banter was great between them, and when it finally did get steamy, that part was good. And throughout almost this entire book, you can just tell how wrong Lena was about what she thought about Aaron, because he is totally into her. So this was another amazing debut, and I was so happy for Elena Armas when she got picked up by a publisher, and her next book is actually being published this year, so I can't wait for it. Also on my list is the one historical romance in my top 21 that's not an old school historical romance, and I'm sure you can probably guess what it is. It is Devil in Disguise by Lisa Kleypas. This one was another absolutely adorable read. Kier is this slightly grumpish Scottish hero. He's Lisa Kleypas's first Scottish hero, and he falls in love with a widow, Merritt. If you read the Wallflower series, Merritt is the daughter of Marcus and Lillian, and she's such a headstrong, fiery heroine. She knows what she wants and goes after it. Kier is so freaking sweet. He just Treasures Merit, and it is kind of insta-lovey, but honestly I kind of love it. And there is something that happens, this specific trope that I'd love to read, especially in historical romances, that happens here. So it's not like there's no angst or drama here, because there is. This one is just so easy to love, so feel good. Kier is a new favorite hero of mine from Lisa Kleypas. I even had some extremely high expectations for it just because of who the main characters are, but Lisa Kleypas did not let me down. Also, another hype book was It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is like the perfect summer beach read. It takes place in this small oceanside town. The heroine is based off of Alexis from Schitt's Creek. Piper is like the socialite who gets cut off from her money, and now she's forced to go to this small town and try to remodel her late father's bar, which is also where she's living in, which is pretty different from what she's used to. And she falls for a very, very grumpy hero. Brendan is a sea captain, and he at first thinks that Piper doesn't really have what it takes to stay in this town and build a new life for herself, but I mean, he is still a pretty typical Tessa Bailey hero because he wants Piper bad. It's very insta-lusty. It's got Tessa Bailey's like classic steam and dirty talk. It was just a great summery read, such a good opposites attract kind of romance, and I had so much fun reading it. A monster romance novella made it into my top 21, and I feel like I've talked about this one quite a few times, but it was that good. It is Morning Glory Milking Farm by Sam Nascosta. I had no idea what to expect from this one, but I definitely didn't expect to love it so much. It is a monster romance with a Minotaur hero, and the heroine, she has a new job of milking Minotaurs. So it's a super weird book, a very unique premise, but I loved Violet and Rourke are so into their slow burn and really into this world of monsters coexisting with humans. I would say if you're kind of curious about this one, if you're curious about monster romances, this one would be a great intro to monster romances just because it's very light and fluffy. We have a hero who would literally do anything for the heroine, and I'm always such a sucker for that. I also really loved First Love Take Two by Sajni Patel. It's a second chance romance, one of my favorite tropes, probably my top favorite trope just because I love the angst, and I love a hero who wants to do everything he can to get back with the heroine. We have the roommates trope between exes. Preeti and Daniel fell in love years ago, but they broke up because of their families. Now they're roommates and they have to share the same room and the same bed. So it sounds really adorable, and it is. I adore the romance, but there is a heavier, more intense and emotional plot to this book as well. It sometimes does overshadow the romance, but I personally didn't mind it here. There's a lot of discussions about mental health, about racism that I felt like were really well written with the romance. But honestly, my favorite part about this one was pretty much Daniel, because he was such a sweetheart. And then this next book, I'm cheating a little bit because it's actually a series. It is the Cinderella trilogy by Kay Webster. Book 1 is Stroke of Midnight, book 2 is Prince Charming, and book 3 is The Glass Slipper. This was such an addicting series. When I read it, I just could not stop reading. It's slightly dark, it's slightly mafia, it is very, very steamy because it's Kay Webster. I mean, it's pretty much a sugar daddy romance. It's got age gap, it's got an asshole hero. I loved Winston so much. So it's a Cinderella retelling. It's a dark, kinky Cinderella retelling. The heroine's name is Ash. She's just lost her college fund because of her dad, so she becomes Winston's sugar baby. Winston is twice her age and such a jerk, but you can't help but love him, especially when he's like, how the heck am I falling in love with this girl, and how is she coming to mean so much to me? It's a great series. It's definitely my favorite from Kay Webster so far. And bonus, there is a spin-off duet of this series, which I actually have been really enjoying. So if you like the series, there is definitely more from this world. Death by Laura Thalassa also made my top 21. This is the final book in her Four Horsemen series, which is of course about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. It's a post-apocalyptic fantasy romance series. This one was an amazing ending to the series. I loved how it played out, especially towards the end, because we do get like a reunion of the Four Horsemen, but Death and Lazarus were fantastic. I love them. Death, surprisingly, is a total sweetheart. I mean, he is really obsessive and possessive, but he would do anything for Lazarus except let her go, which I mean is how I like my heroes. So Lazarus is the only human being, the only person in the world that Death can't seem to kill, which is why he's so intrigued by her. The romance has so much good push and pull. Lazarus is like, how am I falling in love with a being that literally kills so many people. It does follow a pretty similar pattern to the first 3 books in the series because these heroes are not good guys, but Laura Thalassa does do a really good job of making you believe in the romance and believe in the heroes. So this one was so good, definitely worth the wait, and Death is in my top 2 of the 4 horsemen. He's pretty much tied with War for me. Another super steamy book that made it onto my list is Love Unexpected by QB Tyler. This one is an age gap forbidden romance and very, very taboo because he is her stepdad. Stasia's mom, Dominic's wife, she passes away, and Dominic and Stasia then grow really close to each other. They never really were when Dominic and her mom got married, but they connect over their grief. They connect when they go away on this little vacation together just to get away from everyone. The romance was believable. I mean, it is very lust heavy, but that's kind of what I wanted it to be. This one is also easily the hottest book that I read last year. It was so steamy. I've read a lot of romances, right? And I've kind of become numb to a lot of things that happen in these romances, but this book was the opposite of numb. If you want something hot, you definitely need to read this one. Another popular book on this list is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. She has been hit after hit for me. I loved Beach Read, and I loved this second book, the second adult romance from her. I love her writing. I love her sense of humor. Her characters always have such good banter. So this one is a Friends to Lovers kind of second chance romance. Poppy and Alex met in college and they became best friends, and every summer they would go on vacation together, except 2 years ago they had a falling out and they haven't seen each other since. It's summer again and Poppy really wants to mend the relationship, so they go on another vacation together. The romance is so sweet. I loved how opposite the main characters are. Poppy is wild and carefree, and Alex is very steady. He's a homebody, but they just click and work together. I just had so much fun reading this one. I was just rooting for Poppy and Alex to finally get back together. They're just perfect for each other, and it was just a perfect Friends to Lovers romance. Another finale I read and loved last year was Brother Song by TJ Klune. This is the 4th and final book in his Green Creek series. It's an paranormal romance series, and here we have a romance between 2 werewolf shifters. It's Carter and Gavin's romance, and it's kind of a star-crossed lovers romance just because Gavin is the son of Carter's family's greatest enemy. But the thing about Gavin is that for the past few years he's been living more as a wolf than as a human. So he's a type of hero who is very primal and animalistic. He's very wild and untamed, and I love reading those kinds of heroes. And Gavin is just so possessive and adoring of Carter. I mean, Carter is too of Gavin, and their romance gets super angsty and emotional. This book definitely hit hard. It's like the culmination of everything that happened in the first 3 books. We finally get like that final battle. But in between all the angst and the emotions, it's also really funny. Like Carter's family, the Bennetts, they are so wonderful and hilarious together. So this one, it had it all, and it's one of my favorites of the series. A mafia romance that I loved last year was Twisted Pride by Cora Riley. This is my favorite Cora Riley book so far. It was so good. Such a good mafia kidnapping romance. Remo is the capo of the Camorra family. He's the oldest of his brothers. He's a leader, and he ends up kidnapping the niece of a rival mafia family's capo. Remo literally kidnaps Sarah on her wedding day. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of hate especially. I loved how strong Sarah was. Like, she never backed down from Remo. Even though she was his captive and everything, she never stopped fighting. I love the romance here. I love the intensity of the push and pull. Remo is like this crazy, hot-headed alpha hero, and I love that Sarah was able to stand up against him. So this one is definitely a new favorite mafia romance. Another paranormal romance that I loved was The Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. This is a rejected mate's romance, a groveling romance. I have to include this one just because I've reread it so many times already. It's a werewolf shifter romance. Killian is the werewolf shifter alpha, and he rejects Una. He doesn't believe that she is his fated mate when she tells him she is, so she gets someone to yank this mating bond out of her, and when Killian Killian finds out about this, he realizes that he's lost the best thing that ever could have happened to him, and he does everything he can. He grovels to reform this bond. So this one was angsty as hell, but I love that the heroine here wasn't pining over the hero who rejected her. She definitely did not make it easy for Killian to get back with her. She made him work for it. So this one was great. I fell in love with Rejected Mates. It was my first time reading Rejected Mates, and I am totally into it now. Next on my list is Dolly for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This one is 100% a rom-com, an actual rom-com with an illustrated cover. I wouldn't say this one is too romance heavy, but I didn't mind it, and I kind of knew that going into it. It's definitely more about the heroine Meddy and her four aunties, her four meddling aunties, and them trying to get rid of this dead body that Meddy accidentally got killed on her blind date. It was so ridiculous and hilarious. I just had a really fun time reading it. I was laughing so much while I was reading it. It is pretty over the top and unbelievable, but if you suspend your disbelief, then you will have an amazing time with it. There is also a romance here. It's a second chance romance between Meddy and her college sweetheart, but the aunties here definitely stole the show. I have two new favorite reverse harem romances that I read last year. This first one is a series. It's the Dark Side series by Christy Cunning, and this one is paranormal romance, urban fantasy. It was so good. Another super addicting series. I binged it so hard when I first discovered it. It's about a ghost heroine and these four warriors from hell, literal hell. The romance is fairly slow burn, but I loved it, and I also loved how funny the books are. Taka, our ghost heroine, she has no idea who she is. She's lost all her memories, but she is so funny in the way that she deals with things and the way that she just talks with no filter. She finds these four hot, gorgeous guys and sticks with them until they finally are able to see her, and they all try to figure out who exactly she is and what their relationship is, why they are the only ones who can see her. I love that there's amnesia here. I loved all the action. Like, there is never a dull moment in the series. It's a 4-book series. It starts off with 4 psychos, and it was just so good. The other reverse harem romance that I loved last year was A Lady of Brooksgrave Manor by Catherine Moon. Catherine Moon was a new discovery for me last year, and I fell so in love with her after reading this one. I read a couple more books after this, but A Lady of Brooksgrave Manor is still my top favorite. It's a reverse harem monster romance series. We have a heroine and 5 heroes. She's like a regular human, but then her heroes are all sorts of monsters. There's a golem, there's a vampire, a sphinx shifter, an invisible man, and a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of hero, where Mr. Hyde is the monster. This one was crazy hot. The heroine is very sex crazed, but I love the romance. I loved how each romance developed with each hero. Booker the golem is my favorite of the 5 guys, but they're all so great. I loved how they adored and cherished the heroine, and Esther is one of the few humans who genuinely grows to love and care for monsters. This was so good. It was my first time reading reverse harem, and I totally got behind it because of this book. I love that it was a combination of historical, paranormal, erotica. It just was all so well done. Another series that I fell in love with back in 2021 was the Filthy Rich series by Angelina M. Lopez. I read the first 2 books and adored them. Book 1 is Lush Money and book 2 is Hate Crush. Both of these can be read as standalones. They're both royal romances, and they are so angsty. In book 1, Lush Money, there's a marriage of convenience between a poor prince hero and a very wealthy billionaire CEO heroine. They enter this marriage of convenience so that she can get a baby and he can save his poor kingdom. There's so much good tension and angst here. I actually almost cried in one of these scenes. It got so freaking emotional, and I was just dying for the heroine because she's sort of a cold heroine. People, especially the hero Mateo, they think that Roxanne has no feelings, that she's not capable of love, but she is, and it takes Mateo way too long for him to realize that. So the angst and steam here, so good. And then in book 2, Hate Crush, things get even more amped up, the emotions and the angst, and there is some good groveling here. It's a second chance romance between the princess heroine and a rock star hero. It's got another fake dating trope. I read so many good ones last year. So Aish broke Sophia's heart because he wanted to be a rock star more than he wanted to be with Sophia, and now that he is in her kingdom, she is not happy about it. But they're forced to fake date to get some good publicity, and there's so much good angst. Aish knows that he literally lost the best thing that ever happened to him when he broke Sophia's heart, and now he will take scraps from her. My heart was hurting literally the entire time I was reading this one. So if you love angsty second chance romance romances like I do, I highly recommend this one. Another top favorite from last year was The Redemption by Nikki Sloan. This is an age gap romance with a sort of villainous hero, or like the hero was a villain in the first 3 books, and now he gets his romance. So McAllister is filthy rich, he's the CEO of his family's company, and he was the villainous dad in the first 3 books, and now he gets his redemption. His is an age gap romance. Sophia is like over 20 years younger than him, but I loved how they both were on equal footing because she had something that he desperately needs. This one was my favorite of the Filthy Rich American series. I mean, it's a great series, but McAllister and Sophia were top tier. I loved how hot these two were together. I mean, I had a lot of high expectations when it came to McAllister, and he did not disappoint. And even though you can read this one as a standalone, I highly recommend reading the series in order. I also loved Lessons in Sin by Pam Godwin. This is a very, very taboo and kinky book. It's a priest romance. It's got age gap, enemies to lovers, and forbidden romance. The hero, Magnus, is a priest, and he is also Tinsley's new teacher. She's been sent away to this boarding school, and he's pretty much the one in charge of reforming her and her wild ways. She is 18 though, so it's totally fine, but I loved how these two go head to head constantly. Tinsley is kind of a brat when it comes to Magnus, but I loved how they kind of played that into their kink. I love Pam Godwin's take on a priest romance. I mean, when it comes to priest romances, you're always wondering how things will end up. I actually love the ending here. It was my favorite part of the book. It was so freaking swoony and romantic. So I love these two. I loved how hot this book was, and bonus, this book is actually set in the same world as the Kay Webster series, the Cinderella trilogy. The heroine here, she is the younger sister of Winston, the hero in the Cinderella trilogy. And then the final book in my top 21 is Blood Heir by Alona Andrews. I kind of saved this one for last just because it's the least romancy of my picks. It's straight up urban fantasy with barely any romance. It's more like me projecting the romance onto this book. It's a spin-off of one of my all-time favorite series, the Kate Daniels series, which is also urban fantasy. Blood Heir is the first book in Julie's story, her series. I mean, I'm hoping it's a series. She was just a kid in the Kate Daniels series, but now she's all grown up and she's returned home back to Atlanta and tries to save her family. Her hero, I mean, I'll call him a love interest for now just because it's not 100% certain, but she used to have this teenage crush on Derek, and he does show up here, and I was just dying inside. I really wish we got more romance here, but honestly, I still love this book. It was amazing. It was everything I wanted in a Kate Daniels spin-off. You've got action and humor, some tension between the main characters. It was such a good start to the series, and I am dying for more. And like I mentioned earlier, I do have some honorable mentions, mostly my old school historical romance favorites, but I do have another non-historical romance honorable mention. I didn't want to include this one just because it was a reread. It is Dark Needs and Night's Edge by Cressley Cole. I did a reread of the Immortals After Dark series. This is book 4, and I forgot how much I love this one. It's a paranormal romance between a ghost heroine and a vampire hero, and he's the only one who can see her. It was so freaking romantic and passionate here. I adore the heroine. Naomi was hilarious and awesome. But for my historical romances, I fell in love with quite a few that were released in the 80s and 90s. This one is Devil's Bride by Stephanie Lawrence. This is the first book in her Sister series, and it's such a good marriage of convenience romance. It's got some of the best chemistry and tension that I've ever read. Devil and Honoria are strong, intense characters. They're both kind of alphas, and they constantly go head to head. He wants to marry her, and she does not want to get married. It's got great banter, great wit. I just loved how smart these two were. Annie's Song by Katherine Anderson is another top favorite. I fell so hard for this one. It is one of the sweetest romances that I've ever read. If you love good guy heroes, you will definitely love Alex. It's another marriage of convenience romance. I think all the ones that I'm going to mention have some sort of marriage of convenience, but here we have a deaf heroine who gets pregnant by her rapist, and the hero marries her to save her reputation. It's a Western romance, not quite cowboys, but definitely ranch stuff, like they're on a ranch. I fell in love with the romance here. It was so sweet, and I just could not get over Alex, our hero. Midnight Rider is my most recent top favorite, and this one is another Western romance. It's actually a kidnapping historical romance. The hero kidnaps the heroine. He blames her for the death of his brother. It's enemies to lovers. There's so much good hate and tension, which all leads to such a passionate romance. And I also loved how the hero, he has a side job of being an outlaw. He's secretly this dark and dangerous outlaw who's been stealing from from the Rich. I also can't not include Whitney My Love by Judith McNaught. A lot of people either love this one or hate this one, and I definitely love it. I loved our alpha obsessive hero. The hero wanted the heroine, he loved her fire and her passion, and kind of forced her hand in marriage. He does this secretly though. She doesn't know that they're gonna be married, but he does actually genuinely try to make her fall in love with him. It's another angsty romance that I loved. I mean, Clayton is a total idiot at times, but I kind of love that it just added to the angst and my heart was just hurting. The romance itself was so wonderful. I loved how Clayton and Whitney were together. There's so much good banter and wit. She's sort of a rebel heroine and he's just so intrigued by her. He wants to know everything about her. And then the final book on this giant list is The Wedding by Julie Garwood. This is a medieval Scottish historical romance with another marriage of convenience. The hero literally kidnaps the heroine on her way to get married. She's actually supposed to marry his greatest enemy. So he takes her in revenge and I just loved it. I loved how funny it was, how charming, even though it kind of sounds bad. I mean, there's kidnapping, but I loved how Brenna just did the best she could. She's strong and feisty and just made the best out of what she was given, and she definitely makes her hero fall hard. Connor is great. He's your typical Julie Garwood alpha hero who just grows to adore the heroine. I love this one. It's another favorite of mine from Julie Garwood. And that's it for my best of 2021. Let me know if we share any top favorites from last year. I always love hearing your thoughts. Links to everything will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you all next time. Bye!